Jason,
Joe,
what's up, man?
how you doing?
Hey, living the dream. We
I'm
got some
glad to
sun-
hear it.
we got some sunshine here in Kansas City. How you holding up?
We're in something like the 30s or 40s.
What? Where you at?
Pennsylvania,
Oh
second
my
winter
God.
has kicked in.
Are you near Pittsburgh?
I'm in Pittsburgh.
Man, I am so happy the Pirates are in first place, dude. I have I have no ties to Pittsburgh at all, but the fact that another team in that division, I just saw that P in first place and I was like, finally. Like
Looks
even
like,
the Royals are losing bad, but Baltimore's here and they're in first anyway. No, I didn't mean to cut you off.
oh no, I was just saying, I don't want to get too far ahead. I mean, I'm actually a Yankees fan. I grew up a
Okay,
Yankees fan. So
I
I mean,
gotcha.
I got love for the Pirates too, of course. So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens. It's
Yeah.
never, I mean, it's such a weird sports dichotomy in this city right now. The Penguins had an off year, but now the Pirates are winning. So it's
Yeah.
like, I guess something to satiate the Yinzers, right?
Well, it happens here in Kansas City. We won the Super Bowl and we've had a horrible team. This team is an incarnation of bad that I haven't seen in a
The
long
Ro-
time. Like they,
the Royals, you mean?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's abysmal, dude. Like, no.
Well,
Like
I mean, Yankees are in the same boat right now. I can't figure them out.
I can't either, man. Like I like the playoffs were heartbreaking to watch because they were booing and Donaldson was fighting with the fans and
I know.
Judge does this big home run thing. I mean, we have Chapman now and I'm like, how is Chapman coming to Kansas City? And he looks like a different dude now.
Yeah, they dropped the ball with him. I mean, they had no bullpen whatsoever. I'm not shocked at all they got swept by Houston,
Yeah.
but I mean that just they did him wrong.
Yeah, I get it. Well, hey, it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute
Likewise.
out today. I appreciate it. And before we get into your life and your impressive resume, I want to know, how did you survive COVID? The last 3 years was quite a thing. How did you get through it? And how has it changed the way that you live your life and conduct business now?
It was a crazy time in at the beginning of COVID. It's funny how it all came together. I've been doing podcasting since 2015,
Yeah.
but when COVID was, I mean, it wasn't even really a blip on the radar when I came into 2020. I just turned 40 and I was working in the craft beer business. I was working with some breweries and bars and doing some marketing, doing sales, helping them get products placed, and it really was going well, but as I had turned 40, I didn't have the same passion that I did when I was 33 when I started that little project, because I was just an older person now that wasn't going out as frequently and partaking in all the drinking that I once did in an early part of my life. And I started to look at everything from the concept or the perspective of, what do I want to be doing long term? And can I be doing this into my 50s and 60s? And the answer was no. But if there was one element of my business that I could be doing, it was the podcasting side, where I had helped a couple people get their shows off the ground, and I really wanted to put emphasis there, but I also didn't want to jump off a ship that was still floating in a great way.
Yeah.
Well, then COVID hit. And when COVID hit Pennsylvania, I mean, and I know it was like this around the country and even in other parts of the world, things shut down to a massive degree. And that included many of the places that I was selling product to. So I was in a position I had to get very creative, because everybody I worked with was like, well, obviously we don't want to do this, but we really don't have a use for you right now.
Yeah.
So it was like, go from this very successful enterprise to zero, or get very creative with what I was doing. So I leaned into the podcasting side of things more. I still worked with those breweries and figured out a way to make things stay afloat in the time being while I could make this transition. And then in 2021, I decided to go full bore into podcasting and been running with that ever since. So
Cool.
in a way, COVID really forced my hand,
Yeah.
because I was thinking about what I was going to be doing long term, but I made that transition and it's worked out for the best.
Good for you. Yeah. And I guess that's what I want to kind of get to right now, of all of the avenues that you've gone down and where you're at right now. I want to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at a career day. And one of the kids looks up and says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them here in 2023?
I would say that I tell stories for a living.
Cool. That's
And
good.
that's one of the greatest things about the podcasting platform, is not only do you get an amazing opportunity to connect with like-minded professionals like yourself, Joe. I get this opportunity to have a great conversation with you. I also get to speak to your audience, and I get to tell some stories about my past and what's built me into the person that I am today. And it's a tremendous way to build my brand. And this is why I recommend it and help others do the same, because that authenticity is what people are striving for, are looking for, are yearning for.
Yeah.
And if you put your authentic story in front of people and they resonate with it, they're going to be much more inclined to follow you to the next level, where they may join you on social media, jump on your website, subscribe to your newsletter, listen to your podcast,
Yep.
whatever you're doing that brings value into the world. If you're presenting yourself as this authentic person who's been through some things,
Yeah.
you've probably experienced some things that weren't necessarily positive, but you learned from the negative experiences and it shaped and molded you into who you are, gives you an amazing opportunity to get to undeniable levels. And if you can express that through telling a good story, man, that's a lot of fun. That's a
Yeah.
tremendous way to grow.
It is, and the interesting thing about podcasting is that in this very divided world we live in, there's such a level of like a therapeutic avenue to understand each other, to understand that we're all probably more alike than we're not.
Oh, 100%. In no other environment do I feel that you have this ability to level the playing field that you do in podcasting, because no matter how far you've gotten on your professional or personal journey, when you come together with somebody that may be a little bit further than you or maybe even a little bit behind you, you have this opportunity to connect. And your goal is to have a conversation that leads to great content that the world can consume. In order to make that happen, you have to work together collectively, or else it's not going to come off as something that people really want to get invested in.
Yeah,
So, being a genuine human being on either side of the microphone and getting that opportunity to just come together, work synergistically to create something special, really can be an oasis in your day and ultimately create something that changes the world.
absolutely. So how did this begin for you? Go back to where you were born and raised and the seeds that were planted in you to become who you are.
Yeah. I was born in a little town of Bradford, Pennsylvania. It's about 3 hours north of Pittsburgh, where I live now. And Bradford is the home of the Zippo lighter. If you look
Okay.
for it on a map, you may find it, but the
Yeah.
Zippo lighter is something that's pretty famously known. That's our little claim to fame. And moved to Pittsburgh probably 20, I think it's 21 years ago. But back in Bradford, very small town, but we had an absolute blast when we lived there. We all knew that, I mean, for the most part, we were all going to be venturing off to new parts of the world. But the friends that I've made, or the friends that I did make back in school, I'm still friends with many of them today. And I remember my dad telling me when I was younger that I'd be very fortunate if I had three people that I was friends with once I got out of school. And I think that for the most part, I've got more than that, but also many people that I can connect with more frequently. And I think we can thank social media for that luxury. That was something that was not in my dad's world, especially when he made that comment to me. But growing up in Bradford, where, like I said, was a great time. And with my parents, or being, my parents, obviously they were together, me and my sister, we were never wanting. We had a great household. We always had fun. It was just a wonderful environment to be a part of. They were strict and not overly strict, but wanted us to become good people. And they instilled values in us that we still carry with us to this day. One being, for me, and I know my sister the same way, work ethic. My parents worked incredibly hard and were very proud of the work that they did. And they weren't entrepreneurs, but the companies they worked for, they were very loyal to, and they were able to advance very far and make great strides. And I always saw that, and I always viewed what they were doing as a template for what I wanted to do in my life as well, whether it was something on my own or working for a company. I learned at a very young age that I did have an entrepreneurial bug inside of me, and I started selling sports cards at the age of 13 at local card shows and to friends at school and on the bus. And it was a little industry that I just would turn around and blow the profits on more inventory and just buy more cards. But I
Of
was
course.
13. What did I know? But
Absolutely.
yeah, it was a very fun environment to be a part of, and a lot of memories from my time in Bradford for sure.
Who's been kind of a hero for you in your life, a role model?
I always look to my mom and dad, and I say that with with great affection. And it always takes me back to tell you a story. I remember when we were graduating back in 1998, my mom worked for Zippo, and they had a little, I don't know, you call it a newsletter, magazine, whatever would go out. I think it was a quarterly release, and they wanted to feature the kids that were graduating from parents that worked at Zippo, and there was a handful of us, and we had to do a little interview. And one of the questions they asked us was, "Who was your hero, or who did you look up to?" And many people are saying, "Oh, sports figures, Michael Jordan, and blah blah blah." I said, "My parents." And I remember my dad telling me, they were very happy that I said that. And my dad was at the golf course one day, and somebody made a comment like, "Oh, here comes the hero." And he just turned right around and looked and said, "I'd rather have my son say that I'm his hero than some sports figure that he's never met."
Yeah, that's great.
And that story always stuck with me because I knew I was. I mean, and it wasn't like I was just intentionally trying to get some brownie points. That was genuinely how I felt, and to this
Yeah,
day, still feel the same way because there's still incredible forces in my life and serve as inspirations, motivators. Sometimes if I need a kick in the ass, I can always turn to my dad for that. I know he's never going to be bashful about doing that because he wants me to succeed.
yeah.
And that work ethic that they instilled in me, it's something that I can't thank them for enough. So I can't look any further than my mom and dad when I say who my heroes are.
Who would be a dream guest for you to interview on a podcast? Who would you love to meet and talk to?
It's funny. I've been asked this question in a number of different ways, and it's only because I think the body of work that this man had done over the course of his life and the things that you've seen, I think would be so amazing to tap into it. Is Andre the Giant.
Oh yeah.
And I had always thought about that back when I had my beer podcast because this was a guy. There are many stories about the numbers of beers that he could put away in a single sitting. So I always thought that would be the type of person to sit down with and know up front that I'm never going to keep up, but I get to watch this and
Yeah,
record it on my podcast. But
yeah,
just knowing all of the things that he went through in his life with, I don't know, is it gigantism? I'm not sure what the exact name of the disease that he had, where he was always growing. And they talked about how travel was such an inconvenience for him because he didn't fit on a plane and very few cars could hold him. And just getting an opportunity to tap into that story to see how this man lived his life and became such a well-known figure, to me, I think there'd be so much that you could tap into. And I know a lot of it's been covered, and something I try to do as a podcaster and take pride in is digging a little deeper.
yeah,
So I'd want to take some of those stories and get more to the heart of them to try to bring out something that he never talked about before. Unfortunately, I'm never going to get that opportunity,
yeah,
but a boy can dream in another life.
yeah,
Maybe Andre the Giant and I cross paths and we can make this happen.
yeah, totally. He reminds me of Peter Mayhew, Chewbacca. And I went to a Comic-Con in Kansas City, and there was a guy that came through on one of those scooters. And my son, Miles, at the time was probably 11 or 12, and I kind of pulled him because this cart was coming so fast. And I just looked back and I was like, because we knew he was going to be there. And I looked back and I'm like, oh my God, dude, Chewbacca almost ran over you. It was awesome.
Story
So,
for a lifetime.
yeah, absolutely. So, what is it that ultimately motivates you? Every day you wake up, you have things that you want to do that you do, but you have a motivator. What is it that gets you going?
One thing would be my daughter. Obviously, for from the personal side of things, I want to create a life for her that obviously she sees the same type of work ethic that I saw in my parents because I want her to carry that on as she grows up, and I want her to have the best life possible. So that motivates me to get going every day. But I think just as important, maybe a 1A would be seeing the success of others come to life. And I'm always trying to impact people, whether I'm working with them directly as a client or if they are just absorbing a piece of content that I've created, whether it be a podcast episode or a reel or a YouTube video, whatever the case may be. I'm trying to impact one person a day in some way, shape, or form. And if I can get somebody that reaches out that says, "Thank you for saying this or for doing that," that makes me very happy because I take more pride in seeing the success of others than what I'm doing in myself. I try to inhabit that cleaner mentality. If you're familiar with the book Relentless by Tim Grover, to where you're not seeking that recognition, you're trying to create something because you know this is the right way to do it and you want to see other people experience that success. And then your next step is just saying, "Done, next,"
Yeah.
because you're constantly striving to get to the next level no matter what level you're at. So if someone were to evaluate me or if Tim Grover were to evaluate me, I don't know 100% he'd call me a cleaner. I would like to think so, but I'm making strides towards that mentality as much as possible. And in regards to sports figures being people that you idolize, he was the trainer for Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan, two of my all-time favorite basketball players. And I know the mentality that those two brought to the game, and to be able to take just a small chunk of that and implement it in what I'm doing, it's a good motivator, but ultimately what it's leading to is helping others get to the next level so they can experience a breakthrough and get something phenomenal from the efforts they're putting forth.
What was one of the podcast episodes that maybe you were nervous going in, but you grew a lot? One of the more growing, interesting, introspective interviews you've had?
I would say this goes back to my very first podcast, and it was I stumbled into this whole thing completely by accident. Our podcast had been going for a few months, and we were just really getting our feet wet. And I look back on that and know that I was still an incredibly green podcaster at the time. But I worked for a brewery here in Pittsburgh, and the two brewers were tremendous Coheed and Cambria fans, and I'm a fan of that band as well. And I was thinking they were coming to Pittsburgh for a concert. So in my head, I was out on sales calls one day and I'd stop for lunch. I was thinking maybe I can try to pull off a little surprise for the Brewers. And if these guys have nothing to do on the day of the concert, maybe they'd like to come down to the brewery, and just I'll give them a tour and they can hang out and meet the Brewers. And I just wanted to surprise them and give them. It was just a little fun thing I was thinking about. So I went on Twitter and I went into the direct messages and I sent a message, and no, I'm sorry, I didn't send a direct message because you can't do that. I just sent it openly on
Yeah.
Twitter, because if they're not following you, you can't get a response, or you can't get the message to go through. And that's what they followed me so they could message me. And they said that, thank you for the invitation. Would you be interested in doing a collaboration beer? I was like, whoa. So I just
Wow.
raised and you went all in. That's amazing. So now I had to break the secret, and I went to the guys and said, hey, like, this is a thing that could happen. What do you think? They're like, holy shit, yes. Like, let's
Yeah.
get this going. So we got it together. I mean, they didn't come to the brewery or anything like that, but they lent their name to it. And the beer was called Screamin' Danger, which was a
Wow.
line from one of the songs.
Yeah.
And I had coordinated a release party for the beer at one of the bars that was next to the concert venue, and they were partnered with one of the radio stations here, and they were doing some publicity. So I said, what the hell, I'm just going to throw my name at this and see what happens. I said, could we potentially get the band on our podcast? And they immediately were like, yeah, absolutely. I was like, whoa, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Like, I just figured like they'd be like, no, there's not enough time in the day for that. But no, they immediately said yes, and ended up getting to have a half an hour conversation with Claudio Sanchez, the lead singer of the band, very well known, prominent figure in the industry.
Yeah.
And I knew going in, it was me, my co-host, and one of the brewers, and they were a little starstruck walking in, and they didn't know what to say. So I knew immediately that I had to take the lead,
Yeah.
because I didn't want us to look like a bunch of stargazing fools. I wanted us to look professional and have a reason to be in the room sitting with him. And so I took the lead on that, and it turned out to be a great interview and a great conversation. And we tapped into some stories about the band and the tour and talked about the beer. And then after that, they went to the release party, and I was the person that got to go on stage and introduce them to everybody. Again, they just sort of threw a mic at me and said, here you go. So all these little experiences it was like drinking from the fire hose, and they got thrown at me almost with no preparation, but I knew I was meant to be there. So I had to step up. So I grew up a lot in those experiences. And by doing them, it made me realize there's nothing to be afraid of if you own the situation.
Hmm.
You don't fear what's in front of you. You can conquer everything. But if you've got even a shred of doubt, sometimes that can hold you back. So that
Yeah.
experience changed my mentality on this whole media production game job, and we call it what you want, but it was definitely a difference maker.
So speaking of being starstruck, you're a sports fan, Yankees fan. If you could go back in time in history and see a game, a moment in person, where are you going?
That's a I'll, I probably would have to say Immaculate Reception, December 23rd, 1972, I believe was the exact date. But that moment in Steelers history
Yeah.
is still to this day beloved as the most memorable experience. And that was, going into this past season, 50-year anniversary, and Franco Harris dies 2 days before they're going to honor him for it. It was sad. I mean, it was so
Yeah.
crazy. I mean, being in Pittsburgh, and I had an opportunity. It was just an off chance. I was at one of my old jobs. I'd gone to the bank in the morning and I was walking back, and there was Franco Harris standing on the street.
Wow.
So I just went up and introduced myself, and we talked about the current Steelers for a few minutes, and just said, obviously a big fan of you and what you did for the franchise, and walked away feeling like, wow, I got to meet Franco Harris. That was awesome. But
That's cool.
yeah, so if I could go back and see something live, I think just being in that stadium to be part of that environment when that
Yeah.
took place would have been just an irreplaceable memory.
Absolutely. So, of all of the things that you've done and accomplished in your life, what are you the proudest of?
I would have to say the the raising of a very level-headed child, very motivated child. My daughter's 13, and she's typically, the typical teenager. There's a little bit of rebellion, angst. I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, but what I've seen from her in the past couple of years, and it started during COVID because she was fully remote for, I think it was for her 5th grade tenure or term. And oh my God, she rose to the occasion so much. I mean, for, to thrust upon a 5th grader that they need to be responsible for deadlines and being in class on a computer on time, she managed it like a champ. And I think it gave her this sense of accountability and a great deal of organizational skills and all these things that she can apply to now being back in school with her friends. I know that was something that she missed, but she knew the situation, and she, like I said, did it like a champion. So I've always been very proud of the fact that when she was younger, when we would go out in public, she'd see these kids screaming and throwing tantrums and just making just a horrible scene. And she'd look at me and say, "What is the matter with them?" Because she never did that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that I had to, I mean, I obviously had conversations with her like my parents did with me. When you're in public, this is how you act, and you don't scream and get for tantrums on anything because it's just not going to work. And when I saw how she acted at the early age and how it's continued to evolve as she's grown, I couldn't be more proud. And her mom and I are divorced, but we still have a great relationship in regards to her. And that was one of the first things we talked about when we split up, was that she wasn't going to be a pawn. We weren't
Yeah.
going to play that game like a lot of divorced parents do.
Yeah.
We're very understanding of each other's schedules and trying to make sure that we're both getting time with her, and we both have active roles in her life. And getting the opportunity to see her grow and continue to grow into this wonderful young woman, and I know that's just going to continue to evolve as she moves into high school here in a couple of years, and Lord help me, starts to drive a car and all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Get
Yeah,
ready. Yeah.
couldn't be more proud of what she's become.
So everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, listeners, but you ultimately live your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I see myself as someone that is always willing to give to others and always willing to have a conversation with anybody, which I think is a very notable quality for a podcaster, because in a lot of cases you're meeting somebody cold,
Yeah.
but it's up to you to drive a conversation that creates good content that people want to listen to.
Yeah.
So having that ability to strike up a conversation with anybody, I feel, is a superpower, and I run with it every day. And I try to use it outside of the podcasting realm as much as I can. And sometimes in public it works, especially like if you're in line at the grocery store. Instead of just staring down at the floor, maybe you talk to the person in front of you or behind you, or strike up a conversation with the cashier.
Yeah.
Having a conversation with somebody can open up so many
Yep.
possibilities, and I love the opportunity to get to do that. And like I said, being a podcaster, I feel it's a trait that helps create better content and makes the conversations more engrossing. So I would say I'm always someone that's looking to make others better, and anything that I can do to help them do that, I'm willing to go to that level. And people that work with me or have worked with me will tell you, I don't stop. I look at it from the mercenary standpoint to some degree. If you're putting money in my hand, it's now up to me to deliver because you are investing in something that you want done. I'm the person that you trusted to make that happen. I am on your side to make that happen until it does. So being able to separate failure and get past maybe a mistake or two and think about the big picture and always looking at what I can do to take people to a new level. That's what keeps me going. And that's how I see myself as a valuable asset to the world.
Excellent. Well said. So if anyone wants to listen to your show, learn more about you, anything pertaining to your world, where do they go?
JasonCercone.com is the best place to land because once you land there, you can choose your own adventure. I've got a great mini course available if you're looking to be a podcast guest. Teaches you how to pitch yourself and present yourself so you get more guest appearances, but you can listen to my show. And if you're looking for additional help with the podcasting game, set up a free discovery call with me and we'll wrap and we'll share some ideas and we'll see if it makes sense to work together.
Cool, man. Jason, this has been great. Thank you. I got a quick Pittsburgh Steelers story for you. When I
Yes,
was a,
sir.
when I was a kid, there was a bet, a Monday night football bet with my brother, and he picked the Oilers and I picked the Steelers. So the Steelers kind of became my team when I was a kid. And I remember I got this sweatsuit that had the Steelers patch, and I wore that damn thing all the time. I frayed the shit out of the bottom of it. I had it was all like falling apart. And I remember there was a girl that I had a crush on in school, and the patch was coming off. And it's kind of a badge of honor and to like just kind of galvanize things. I ripped that thing off like a gladiator, and I remember I gave it to her. And years later, I ran into her on Facebook and I said, you know, I will never forget giving you that patch. And I think she still had it. So my claim to Steelers fame is that, but I dug them. I mean, I dug Bradshaw and Franco and that line they had. I mean, they were some mean dudes. I mean, there was
Mhm.
blood out there on the field in the way that we don't see anymore in modern days.
Right.
They were not playing around.
Yeah, I was too young to. I mean, I wasn't born when they won. I mean, they won the last Super Bowl. I was a few weeks old, but I never got to experience that 70s dynasty other than through videos.
Yeah,
Wow. I mean, that
yeah,
is football you don't see anymore.
and we won't.
And no, we won't. I mean, the game has changed so much. It's funny though. Me and my friends were talking about this. Bradshaw was not the greatest. I mean, his
Right.
passing completion percentage is not good.
Yeah,
I think it's like around 50%.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
that was a defensive driven team. And I mean, he was a great quarterback for that situation. And obviously he had great weapons in Franco and Stallworth and Swan and Blyer, you name it, because right down the line, there was just what I've learned about that team is they were so fun to watch just because they were just so gritty
yeah.
and they didn't take shit from anybody.
Yep. No, they didn't. They didn't. Jason, this has been great, man. Thank you for opening up. Best of luck with everything. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate the opportunity to connect with you and join you for this wonderful conversation. It's been a blast.
Absolutely, man. I love it. Cool. Send my best to Pittsburgh.
I will do my best.
All right. Cool.
All
Cheers.
right, brother. Take
Take care.
care.
Bye bye.